After bloody terrorist attacks that shook Europe, the Central Intelligence Department sends its best agent to the Middle East. Here, in the shadow of war and lies, he must track down an elusive terrorist whose organization threatens the whole world. But in order to defeat the enemy, he will have to become part of this game himself. This is the film The Completeness of Lies. After the militants committed in the Sheffield terrorist attack, listening to the recordings of the leader of the terrorist organization al-Salima, begin preparation for the next attack. At the same time, a group of special forces, sent to capture the terrorists, penetrates the house. Realizing that the operation has been revealed, the terrorist activates an explosive device, taking the lives of several fighters with him. A few hours after the tragedy, the agent of the Central Intelligence Department gets in touch with his informant. Bassam informs Roger that one of those who once decided to become immortal after the US invasion of Iraq had turned to him. Now this man has lost faith in his cause and is looking for a way to escape. Roger, along with Bassam, goes to meet Nazar, who is hiding in an abandoned village. Every step of the agent is tracked from the air by a military drone, the operators of which are in the United States. When Nazar comes out of hiding, it becomes clear that he is afraid for his life. Having too dangerous knowledge, he understands that those who know too much are usually turned into martyrs. Nazar does not want to repeat their fate and dreams of escaping to America to start all over again. Roger does not trust Nazar's words, considering his story too convenient to be true. In response, he pulls out a disc with a recording of al-Salim, on which he admits to being involved in the recent explosion in England and calls for new attacks. Understanding the value of the information received, Roger gets in touch with the head of field operations in the Middle East, Adam Hoffman. He reports that Nazar is afraid to be killed by his own people and agreed to cooperate only in exchange for a guarantee of refuge in the United States. However, for Adam, the life of an unknown person is of no particular value. He denies the possibility of protecting the informant, reminding that he himself chose his own path and demands to let him go. According to Adam's calculations, if Nazar is eliminated his own network, it will help the agents to follow al-Salim. Roger has to resort to deception. He persuades Nazar to make another request. Go to the city so that the agents can detain those who try to eliminate him. At the appointed time, the drone again goes on duty, fixing every meter of the streets along which Nazar moves. Roger, remaining in the shadows and relying on the help of Bassam, watches what is happening. Suddenly, a van arrives at the scene, from which a group of armed people jumps out. They wound Nazar and try to push him into the car, but Roger, with an inconspicuous shot, kills him. The agent experiences a bite of conscience due to the murder of a person, but Ed convinces him not to dwell on it, reminding that in any case Nazar was a terrorist and would have surrendered to Roger under torture. Realizing that there is less and less time left, the agent, along with Bassam, heads to the terrorist camp, hoping to get at least some information. Under the guise of a driver, whose car broke down, he approaches one of them, when Bassam opens fire. A short shootout ensues, as a result of which they eliminate all the militants. However, one of them manages to destroy the evidence, committing a suicide. The group of captives sent by Ed arrives too late, and hearing the sounds of approaching engines, the agents hurriedly leave the battlefield, and Roger manages to get a couple of discs out of the fire. Two cars are thrown behind them, and trying to break away from them, Roger opens fire. Soon helicopters are connected to the operation, which, with onboard weapons, destroy one of the pursuing cars, but the second passenger, before being destroyed, manages to launch a shell and blows up Bassam's car. The resisting Roger, who does not want to leave his partner, is taken out of the battered car and, having plunged into the helicopter, is transported to the base. When he regains consciousness, doctors extract fragments of Bassam's bones from his wounds, which were literally torn apart by the explosion. Soon Ed reports that he managed to get valuable information from the discs taken by Roger. Now they have data on another shelter in Jordan, and the agent must go there. Roger asks what the department is going to do for Bassam's family, but Ed cold-bloodedly replies that he was Roger's agent, and the United States does not bear responsibility for his loved ones. After a short time, Roger arrives in Jordan, where he is met by Skip. He takes the agents to the U.S. Embassy to meet with the local operations manager. Holiday explains that the terrorist lair is under constant surveillance, but there is not enough resources, and they cannot monitor the entire city at the same time. When Roger offers to attract local intelligence to the operation, Holiday refuses, fearing possible leakage of information. However, the agent, having received complete freedom of action from Ed, asks Holiday to step aside and hand over the case to him. Having finished with the formalities, he entrusts Skip with organizing a meeting with the head of intelligence in Jordan named Hani Salam. Despite the fact that Ed prefers to keep all operations a secret, Roger is sure that cooperation is necessary in some cases. He informs Hani about the found terrorist shelter and asks for the help of local agents. Salam accepts the offer, but emphasizes that if they started working together, Roger should not deceive him. The next day, Roger goes to the terrorist lair and notices the agents Salam sent nearby. However, suddenly a man sent by Ed approaches one of the militants, and realizing that he is going to be detained, the terrorist tries to hide. Roger realizes that if he manages to escape, he will warn the rest and the lair will be empty. The agent chases him and, having turned from the main streets into narrow alleys, drives the man into a dead end, where he kills, failing to raise the alarm. The dogs bite Roger on the legs, because of which Skip takes him to the hospital to give him an inoculation against rabies, where he meets a nurse named Aisha. In conversation with Ed, Roger asks him not to interfere, fearing that Hani may not like it, who demanded honesty and honesty. Having met with the head of intelligence, the agent apologizes for Ed's interference, and Salam calms Roger down, informing him that, according to his information, the terrorists did not leave the lair. Salam, having accepted the murder of his man for an ordinary attempt at robbery, which often happens in this area, emphasizes that he has already discussed the situation with Ed, and now explains to his agent the basic principles of royal espionage. Meanwhile, the terrorists continue to follow their plan, and this time they attack one of the crowded tourist quarters of Amsterdam. After what happened, Salam drives up to Roger and shares his guesses along the way. Since no one took responsibility for the explosion, they assume that the attack was organized by Al-Salim. Now they need a man in the Jordanian cell, and Mustafa Karani will take this role, who is listed in the ranks of Al-Qaeda. He will agree to work for them, because the agents of the intelligence took his mother out of the Palestinian camp, and on behalf of Mustafa they gave her a house and a quiet life. She is sure that her son has become rich in a neighboring country, and now Mustafa owes Hani. And if he refuses to cooperate, his brothers will report that he is working for the intelligence. During a conversation with Ed, Roger refuses to discuss the new agent Salam so as not to undermine the trust of the Jordanian colleagues. Returning to himself, he discovers the head of the apartment. He came to Jordan to personally ask Hani to pass the data on Mustafa. Salam expresses doubts about the ability of the Americans to keep secrets, but Ed insists on his own and hands over the last photo of Al-Salim in exchange for data on the agent. Soon Skip, at Ed's order, attempts to detain Mustafa, but he manages to hide. During another visit to the clinic, Roger tries to get close to Aisha and escorts her to the Palestinian refugee camp. On the way home, Roger is suddenly detained by the people of Salam. Almost forcibly pushing him into the car, they take him to the fireplace, where they show that the camp of terrorists no longer exists. After that, Roger is taken to meet Hani, who reports that the terrorists fled because Skip tried to catch Mustafa. He asks Roger if he knew that Ed ordered Mustafa to be caught, but the American swears that he learns about it from Hani. However, Salam does not believe him and orders to leave the country within 12 hours. Returning to the United States, Roger meets Ed and expresses discontent with his interference in the course of the operation. Ed insists that Salam's interests are limited by his small country, while the interests of the United States are of global importance. He is sure that Salam likes to work with Roger and that he would not harm him. The administration cannot afford to wait while Al-Salim continues to commit terror attacks throughout Europe. Despite Ed's indifference, Roger offers his own plan. To spread the rumor that some terrorist organization is preparing an even more grandiose terrorist attack. Such a strategy may force Al-Salim to leave the shelter and try to establish contact with a new alleged organization that claims superiority over him. The idea finds support from Ed, and he sends Roger to meet Harold, who has a list of people who are not terrorists, but have access to them by birth of their profession. The choice falls on Omar Sadiki, the architect who receives orders from charitable Islamic organizations. Under the guise of a representative of a construction company, Roger goes to Dubai. Having dyed his hair and introduced himself to Brad Scanlon, he meets the architect and asks him to sign a contract with a construction company lawyer. The agent takes a picture of Omar and the lawyer associated with Al-Qaeda, fixing the start of the operation. Waiting for Omar to leave the hotel, Roger breaks into his room and hacks into the computer. Harold receives the architect's data and creates fake accounts, through which he allegedly receives money from members of an unknown society, the Brothers in Consciousness. These translations must be recorded by the Saudis, which means that Al-Salim will also be notified of what is happening. Ed informs Roger that Salam demanded his arrival in Jordan. Having met Roger, Salam admits that he has lost his self-control, kicking Roger out of the country, but again asks the agent not to make mistakes. He emphasizes that in this part of the world, friendship has a special value and can save lives. Roger warns Skip so that he no longer acts around the clock and goes to meet Aisha, who asks to introduce him to his sister, if he has serious intentions. Aisha's older sister, although she is sure that what is happening in the Middle East is a consequence of the actions of the West, does not prevent her from continuing her communication with Roger. Salam amazes the agent with the photos of the architect and the lawyer, taken during Roger's participation. The head of intelligence is surprised that an unknown person greets a member of Al-Qaeda. With difficulty hiding the surprise, Roger thanks Hani for the valuable information and promises to try to find out more about this person. After that, the agent contacts Harold and asks to send a message from Omar's mail, where it is said about the upcoming terrorist attack. Roger reports to Ed that he asked Omar to come to Turkey, supposedly to discuss the details of the construction. Here he is photographed again, recording the arrival of the architect to the country. Soon, an explosion occurs at the U.S. base in Turkey, for which unrequited corpses used as victims were prepared in advance. Following this, Harold sends a message from Omar's mail, in which he takes responsibility for the explosion, creating the impression of the appearance of a new player among the terrorists. The news spreads quickly and attracts the attention of both Al-Salim and Hani, who are shocked by the emergence of a new terrorist organization called the Brothers in Consciousness. Thus, the management is actually setting up an innocent person, whom Al-Salim now perceives as a competitor, who will be supported and financed better. Soon, the suspect architect is horrified, discovering that messages are beginning to arrive to his mail from terrorists glorifying his attack on the U.S. base. Ed praises Roger for the fact that the plan worked. People who have not been in touch for years call Omar, and the voice of one of them suspiciously resembles the voice of Al-Salim. Roger, being not as ruthless as Ed, admits that he cannot allow an innocent person to suffer and decides to take Omar away. However, the appearance of a representative of the construction company at the architect's house frightens him. Retreating from Roger, he gets into the car and leaves, followed by another car. Despite Roger's attempts to prevent the pursuers, they manage to break away and capture Omar. Not understanding what is happening, the architect insists that he is not involved in the terrorist attacks and assumes that everything was arranged by the Americans. Having listened to him, Al-Salim eliminates Omar, as Roger predicted. Ed informs Roger that Omar is dead, and the agent, feeling guilty, says that he can't do this anymore. He is sure that Ed, who is thousands of kilometers away and only observes the events through the screens, does not know what is really going on and refuses to continue working. However, entering the apartment, Roger finds a message, a photo of Aisha. Not remembering himself, he rushes to the girl, calling her non-stop on the way, but when he gets to her house, he realizes that he is late. In desperation, he turns to Hani for help, admitting that the architect was his project and now Aisha was kidnapped. The head of intelligence refuses to intervene, explaining this by the fact that Roger again led him around his finger. Having arrived in the country, Ed states that Roger should have admitted to the seriousness of his feelings to Aisha, and then the department could look after her. The kidnappers contact the agent and offer to exchange him for the girl. He agrees and arrives at the appointed place, from where he is transported to Syria. Having crossed the border, the courier drives into the depths of the country and, having landed Roger in the desert, leaves. The 4 cars that arrived create a dust cloud around the agent, and having put Roger in one of the cars, they diverge in different directions, leaving no room for the drone. Soon he is tied up, and he finally meets Al-Salim, who admits that he paid to capture him. He does not know who got this money, but this is not so important, because an American agent got into his hands. Roger, having seen Mustafa among those present, declares that they will not be able to get a ransom for him, because the U.S. government is not negotiating with terrorists. But the terrorist does not need money. He has already received everything he needed, and when Roger repeats that the department knows where they are, Salim breaks his fingers with a hammer. Having given the order to execute the prisoner, Salim leaves, and his people are accepted to carry out the orders of their leader. But when they say the last prayer, the fire of fire covers the terrorists, and Roger sees the Khan entering with a darkened mind. Al-Salim, getting into his car, realizes that he is in the hands of Jordanian intelligence. Coming to his senses in the hospital, Roger sees Khan, who openly admits to everything. It turns out that no one kidnapped Aisha. His people simply took her out of the apartment, imitating the kidnapping, and the person who contacted Roger when offering an exchange was also his agent. Roger himself was then taken to the desert, from where he was picked up by the people of Al-Salim. When the bait was trapped, Mustafa, who had been working for intelligence all this time, informed Khan that the leader of the terrorists was in place. And the rest was already a matter of technique. The lair was covered, and Salim was in their hands. A few days later, Ed meets Roger and admits that he is one of the best agents he has ever worked with. Now Roger can return to the United States, take a high position, and forever leave behind a merciless war in the Middle East, but Roger is too tired of the work in which human lives turn into a bargaining chip and refuse to offer. He chooses to stay in Jordan and goes to meet Aisha. And at this time, the drone, who has been watching every step of his all this time, stops observing at Ed's order. Roger, being the one who was supposed to control the situation, himself became a figure in someone else's game. And Salam, the real master of this game, showed Ed the simple truth.